Tonight's program, April is National Poetry Month. It's also the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, as well as, that's April 23rd, as well as his birthday is celebrated, I guess, on April 23rd as well. How old would he be, Stephen?
452.
Stephen Collins. Mr. Collins grew up in Cambridge. He received a BA in literature from UMass Boston. After 20 plus years in a sales career, he went back to what he truly loves, and that is performing and teaching. He now has 8 one-man shows and 7 interactive classes where his teaching style has been described as a hybrid between lecture and performance. He also works as a professionally licensed tour guide doing narrated historical tours of Boston. So it's quite versatile. And lastly, Mr. Collins resides in Boxborough. So would you please welcome Stephen Collins.
If you cannot understand my argument and declare it's Greek to me, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you claim to be more sinned against than sinning, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you recall your salad days, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you act more in sorrow than in anger, if your wish is father to the thought, if your lost property has vanished into thin air, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you have ever refused to budge an inch or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you have played fast and loose, if you've been tongue-tied at Tower of Strength, hoodwinked or in a pickle, if you've ever knitted your brows, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, stood on ceremony, danced attendance on your lord and master, had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing, if you've seen better days, or lived in a fool's paradise, why then, be that as it may, the more fool you, for it is a foregone conclusion that you are, as good luck would have it, quoting Shakespeare. If you think it is early days, and clear out bag and baggage, if you think it is high time, and that is the long and short of it, if you think the game is up, and the truth will out, even if it involves your own flesh and blood, if you lie low till the crack of doom because you suspect foul play, if you have your teeth set on edge at one fell swoop without rhyme or reason, well then, to give the devil his due, if the truth were known, for surely you have a tongue in your head, you are quoting Shakespeare. Even if you bid me good riddance, if you send me packing, if you wish I were dead as a doornail, if you think I'm an eyesore, a laughingstock, the devil incarnate, a stony-hearted villain, bloody-minded, or a blinking idiot, well then, by Jove, oh Lord, tut-tut, what the dickens, for goodness sake, but me no buts, for it is all one to me, you are quoting Shakespeare. So, of course, back in Shakespeare's day, there were no directors. The notion of a man, or a woman for that matter, directing a play, that doesn't happen for 100 years after Shakespeare's death. In Shakespeare's time, the members of the acting companies would talk amongst themselves about how they were going to approach a play, a scene, what their concept might be. Shakespeare's company was called the Lord Chamberlain's Men during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. When Queen Elizabeth dies, King James VI of Scotland becomes King James I of England, and they then become known as the King's Men because they receive patronage from the king. Now, if you know Shakespeare's play Hamlet, at the very beginning of the play, Hamlet is visited by what he believes is the ghost of his father on top of the castle. The ghost tells him in grisly detail about his murder at the hands of his brother Claudius, Hamlet's uncle. Now, Hamlet wants to take revenge, but he wants to make absolutely certain that Claudius is guilty. So he sets in motion what has come to be known as the mousetrap, or the play within the play, wherein he will catch the conscience of the king. So a group of traveling players is coming to Elsinore to perform a play called The Murder of Gonzago. And Hamlet gives them 18 lines to add, which will depict the way his father said he was killed by poison being poured in the porch of his ear. So Hamlet is heavily invested that these actors don't just do a creditable job, but that they do a magnificent job. So he advises them in a famous speech that has come to be known as Hamlet's advice to the players. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it as some of your players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand thus, but use all gently. For in the very torrent tempest, and as I may say whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance that may give it smoothness. Oh, it offends me to the soul to hear a robustious, periwig, pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ears of the groundlings who for the most part are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. I would have such a fellow whipped for o'erdoing termagant. It out Herod's Herod, pray you avoid it. Be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action with this special observance, that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so or done is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is, to hold this toward the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. Now, this or done, or come tardy off, though it make the unskillful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of the which one must, in your allowance, overweigh a whole theatre of others. Oh, I have seen players play and heard others praise, not to speak it profanely, that having neither the accent of Christian, nor the gait of Christian pagan or man, have so strutted and bellowed, I had thought some of nature's journeymen had made men, and not made them well. They imitated humanity so abominably. And let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them. For there be of them that will themselves laugh, to set upon some quantity of barren spectators to laugh also. Though in the meantime, some important question of the play be then to be considered. That's monstrous. Shows a pitiful lack of understanding in those who undertake it. Go, make ready. So if William Shakespeare had never written a single play, and I think I ought to say just a couple words about the authorship controversy here. All right? I mean, if you're an Oxfordian, I suppose we can be friends. But I think that the man from Stratford, in my opinion, wrote the plays. All right? It wasn't Christopher Marlowe. It wasn't Francis Bacon. It wasn't Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. I think Shakespeare is the man that wrote the plays. I love the book Will in the World by Stephen Greenblatt. If you're a Shakespeare lover, you should read that book. It's an absolutely fabulous book. So if Shakespeare never wrote a single play, he would still be very famous in the annals of English literature for his composition of 154 sonnets. Taken as a whole, the sonnets represent a profound meditation on time, aging, and flux. Now, scholars believe the early sonnets were addressed to the fair youth who might have been the Earl of Southampton, Henry Risley. And other scholars believe the latter sonnets were written to the dark lady, who might have been a beautiful Italian woman named Emily Bassanos, whose father was a maker of classical instruments and lived in the Elizabethan court. Some scholars will tell you that the sonnets are clear proof that Shakespeare was probably bisexual. I'm not sure about that. I love what Bill Moyers once said when they asked him about the whole authorship controversy. Bill Moyers once said, "I don't care if Mickey Mouse wrote the plays. I'm just glad that we have them." So I'm going to do 4 of my favorite sonnets. I'm sure that you will recognize a couple of these probably. Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines by chance, or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Sonnet 60. Like as the waves make toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before, in sequent toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, where with being crowned, crooked eclipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet 2 times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand. Thank you. So how many people saw Shakespeare in Love 15 years ago or so? All right, in Shakespeare's day, everybody was trying to write sonnets. And that fact comes across in the movie. If you remember the movie, the gondolier says, "Master Shakespeare, I have written some sonnets, and I'd like you to read them and tell me if you think they are worthy." And Joseph Fiennes, the actor that plays Shakespeare, you see him roll his eyes as if to say, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to read these god-awful bad sonnets." So the Shakespearean sonnet, or the English, or the Elizabethan or Shakespearean sonnet, it's called all 3, is a variation of the Petrarchan sonnet from 2 centuries before. Now, I'm not a scholar of Petrarch, but I've read some of the sonnets. The language tends to be very, very, very overblown. And I think in my favorite sonnet, Sonnet 130, I think Shakespeare is poking a little fun at that overblown language. And I also think that he's poking fun at the notion that language can ever adequately describe our feelings, particularly our amorous feelings. So here's my favorite sonnet, and then the one after is my second favorite. So Sonnet 130 is my favorite. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant, I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belie with false compare. So it is true, 400 years since Shakespeare's death. All right, Shakespeare's writing a long, long time before Freud, before the birth of psychology as we know it today. And yet I don't think there's a writer that knows human nature as well as Shakespeare does. Listen to this sonnet 138. When my love swears that she's made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies. That she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false speaking tongue, on both sides thus the simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore says not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore, I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. All right, so Richard II has been in Northern Ireland squelching upheaval, a rebellion. He had thought it was going to take just a couple of short weeks, or maybe at the most a couple of months, but it has dragged on and on and on. And so because of that, the state of the English army is greatly depleted. In Richard's absence, his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, who will become King Henry IV, comes back to England with the express purpose of usurping the throne from Richard. If you know the play, Richard sends him into exile at the beginning of the play. So Richard's back from Ireland, and his army has just narrowly put down some rebellious forces of Henry Bolingbroke's. Richard has been waiting for reinforcements, has been told that reinforcements are coming. After the battle, a courier comes up, and the news is not only are the reinforcements not to be forthcoming, they have defected over to the side of Henry Bolingbroke. So Richard is despondent, as you can imagine, and he addresses for the last time, or the second last time I think, what was once his strong, proud army is now a ragtag remnant of hungry, tired soldiers. Of comfort no man speak. Let's talk of graves, of worms and epitaphs. Make dust our paper, and with rainy eyes write sorrow in the bosom of the earth. Let's choose executives and talk of wills, and yet not so. For what can we bequeath save our deposed bodies to the ground? Our lands, our lives, and all our Bolingbrookes, and nothing can we call our own but death, and that small model of the barren earth which serves as paste and cover to our bones. For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings, how some have been deposed, some killed in war, some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court, and there the antic sits, scoffing his state, grinning at his pomp, allowing him a breath, a little scene to monarchize, be feared and kill with looks, infusing him with self and vain conceit, as if this flesh which walls about our life were brass impregnable, and human thus comes at the last, and with a little pin bores through his castle wall. And farewell, king. Cover your heads and mock not flesh and blood with solemn reverence. Throw away respect, tradition, form, and ceremonious duty. For you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread, like you. Feel want, taste grief, need friends. Subjected thus, how can you say to me, I am a king?
Wow.
So the House of York has just defeated the House of Lancaster in the War of the Roses, or the 30-Year War. All right? Richard, who will become Richard III eventually, Richard is kind of between a rock and a hard place. He doesn't like peacetime. He doesn't like parties. He doesn't like comfort. He would rather be in a state of crisis. He's also a diabolical character who wants power, wants to be king, and will do anything and everything to get that. Now, Shakespeare depicts Richard III as grotesquely deformed and hunchbacked. And if you know, a couple years ago, they actually dug up his bones. All right, they did DNA testing. They found out that he had a slight scoliosis of the spine, but was not as deformed as Shakespeare makes him out to be. So you might ask the question, why is Shakespeare a revisionist historian? And this is Stephen Greenblatt's brilliance, certainly not mine. Greenblatt points out that in Shakespeare's time, Queen Elizabeth was a Tudor. The Tudors were direct descendants of the Lancastrians. So for Shakespeare to portray the enemies of the Lancastrians, and by extension the Tudors, as being deformed was probably a politically expedient thing to do. So I'm going to do the opening part here of Richard III, where he tells you exactly what he's going to do. But I'm not going to get all hunched up, because new evidence says he had a slight scoliosis of the spine. Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this son of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. But I that am not shaped for sportive trick, nor made to court an amorous looking glass, I that am rudely stamped and want love's majesty, to strut before a wanton ambling nymph, I that am curtailed of fair proportion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world scarce half made up, that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why, I in this weak piping time of peace have no delight to pass away the time, unless to spy my shadow in the sun, and descant on mine own deformity. Therefore, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain, and hate the idle pleasures of these days. Plots have I laid, inductions dangerous, by drunken prophecies, libels, dreams, to set my brother Clarence and the king in deadly hate the one against the other. And if King Edward is as true and just as I am subtle, false, and treacherous, this day shall Clarence closely be mewed up about a prophecy which says that G of Edward's heirs the murderer shall be. Dive thoughts down to my soul. Here, Clarence comes. All right, so in Shakespeare's comedy, Much Ado About Nothing, Benedick, a young gentleman of the court, has long decried the debilitating effect that amorous relationships have on otherwise healthy young men. And such a healthy young man, he believes, is his best friend, Claudio. Claudio has fallen hopelessly and helplessly in love with Hero, and because of that, Claudio hasn't been spending a lot of time with his best buddy, Benedick. Benedick is also in major denial about his own amorous feelings for the Lady Beatrice. And I think to deflect attention away from himself, he rails on about his friend Claudio. I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behavior to love, will, after he hath laughed at such shallow folly in others, become the object of his own scorn by falling in love. And such a man is Claudio. I have known when there was no music with him but the drum and the fife, and now had he rather hear the tabor and the pipes. I have known when he would have walked 10 mile afoot to see a good armor, and now will he lie 10 nights awake, carving the fashion of a new doublet. He was wont to speak plain and to the purpose, like an honest man and a soldier. And now is he turned to orthography. His words are a very fantastical banquet, just so many rare, strange dishes. May I be so converted and see with these eyes? I do not know, I cannot tell. I will not be sworn, but love may transform me to an oyster, but I'll take my oath on it. Till he hath made an oyster of me, he shall never make me such a fool. One woman is wise, yet I am well. Another fair, yet I am well. Another virtuous, yet I am well. But till all virtues be in one woman shall not come in my grace. Rich she shall be, that's certain. Fair, or I'll never look on her. Virtuous, or I'll never cheapen her. Noble, or not I for an angel. Of excellent discourse, a good musician. And her hair shall be of what color it may please God. Here comes the prince and Monsieur Love. I'll hide me here in the arbor and see if I can listen. Only Shakespeare could say, and see if I can listen. I will hide me here in the arbor and see if I can listen. All right. Caius Cassius in Julius Caesar is desperate to enlist Marcus Brutus into the conspiracy to assassinate Caesar. Why? Because Brutus's calling card has always been that he is what? An honorable man, a fine, upstanding citizen of Rome. And so Cassius knows that having Brutus on board will lend legitimacy and credibility to the assassination. Brutus doesn't want any part of this, but Cassius works on him and works on him and works on him and convinces him that the republican form of government in which all nobles are given a voice is in danger because Caesar wants to be a dictator or an emperor. And so eventually Brutus is on board. All right, they kill Caesar March 15th, the Ides of March. After, the plebeians, or plebes, the common man, they're all angry. They're at near riot behavior because Caesar was a very popular ruler and he had been instituting all kinds of social programs for them. So Brutus has to explain himself. He's got to quiet the crowd down. So he does that. He feels like everything's under control, and then he leaves. His big mistake, because that leaves the stage open for Mark Antony to come in. So this is Act 3, Scene 1, I believe. This is Brutus first, and then Antony. I get invited to do workshops with 8th graders sometimes. A lot of 8th grade students read Julius Caesar. And I tell them this. I say, imagine this is a debate. If this is a debate, who wins the debate, Brutus or Antony? Another way to think about this is that these are two lawyers delivering their closing remarks to judge and jury whose argument is more cogent. So first, Marcus Brutus. Romans, countrymen, lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for mine honor, and have respect to mine honor, that you may believe. Censure me in your wisdom, and awake your senses, that you may the better judge. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say, Brutus's love to Caesar was no less than his. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. Had you rather Caesar were living to die all slaves, than that Caesar were dead to live all free men? As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. As he was valiant, I honor him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him. There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his valor, and death for his ambition. Who is here so base that would be a bondsman? If any, answer, for him have I offended. Who is here so rude that would not be a Roman? If any, answer, for him have I offended. Who is here so vile that would not love his country? If any, answer, for him have I offended. I pause for reply. Then none have I offended. I have done no more to Caesar than you shall do to Brutus. The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol, his glory not extenuated wherein he was worthy, nor his offenses enforced for which he suffered death. Here comes his body, mourned by Mark Antony, who, though he had no part in his death, shall benefit from his dying, a place in the commonwealth, as which of you shall not? With this I depart, that as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome, I shall reserve the same dagger for myself when my country shall have need of my death. And Brutus unsheathes his dagger. And I've seen lots of productions of this play where Brutus comes right off the stage, right out into the audience. And you can imagine in Shakespeare's time, perhaps the actor playing Brutus jumped right down into the pit with the groundlings. But he's managed to quiet them all down. He resheathes his dagger, and then he leaves. And then Antony proceeds in. The body of Caesar is laid out, and Antony addresses the crowd. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here under leave of Brutus and the rest, For Brutus is an honorable man, so are they all honorable men. Come I to bury Caesar. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious, when that the poor hath cried, Caesar hath wept, ambition should be made of sterner stuff? But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal. I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious. And sure, Brutus is an honorable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me. My heart is with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me. But yesterday the word of Caesar might have stood against the world. Now lies he there, and none so poor to do him reverence. O masters, if I were disposed to stir your hearts and minds to mutiny and rage, I should do Brutus wrong and Cassius wrong, who you all know are honorable men. I shall not do them wrong. I rather choose to wrong the dead, to wrong myself and you, than I will wrong such honorable men. But there's parchment. 'Tis the will of Caesar. I found it in his closet. Let but the commons hear this testimony, which, pardon me, I do not mean to read. And they would go and kiss dead Caesar's wounds, dip their napkins in his sacred blood, yea, beg a hair of him for memory, and dying, mention it within their wills, bequeathing it as a rich legacy into their issue. Remember, Caesar. So Henry IV, Part 1. Hal, Prince Hal, it's finally beginning to dawn on him that he's eventually going to be King Henry V. So he has to quiet down his bad behavior, his raucous bad behavior, which consists of drinking, gambling, and what the Elizabethans famously called wenching. And who was his partner? Who was his partner in wenching? Sir John Falstaff, the Shakespearean character that the great Professor Harold Bloom from Yale, and I kind of see Harold Bloom as Falstaff myself, I really do. But Harold Bloom said that Falstaff was the greatest of all Shakespeare's creations. So Hal will eventually completely disown him in Henry IV, Part 2. And if you know the Shakespeare plays, and it's such a sad, sad scene when he finally has to tell him, old man, I'm done, go away, So this is Part 1, and he offers Falstaff a commission in the army. Falstaff doesn't really want the commission, but Falstaff also wants to be close to Hal. So this is a bit of a paraphrase, but it's the morning before a battle, and Hal and Falstaff are having a conversation. And Falstaff says something to the effect, Hal, all things considered, I wish it was the end of the day, the battle is won, and most importantly, that I'm still alive. And Hal looks at him disdainfully and he says, old man, you owe your country and your God a good death. And then Hal takes off in a flourish leaving Falstaff by himself so that he can soliloquize, and yelling after Hal about his death, he says, "'Tis not due yet. I would be loath to pay him before his day. What need I be so forward with him that calls not on me? Well, 'tis no matter. Honor pricks me on." Yea, but how if honor prick me off when I come on? How then? Can honor set to an arm? No. Or a leg? No. Or take away the grief of a wound? No. Honor hath no skill in surgery? Then no. What is honor? A word. What is in that word, honor? What is that honor? Air, a trim reckoning. Who hath it? He that died of a Wednesday, doth he feel it? No. Doth he hear it? No. Is it insensible then, yea, to the dead? But will it not live among the living? No. Why? Detraction will not suffer it. Therefore, none of it. Honor is a mere scutcheon. And so ends my catechism. So many, many years ago, I worked in a Shakespeare company. We were called the Ever Theater. And in the mid to late 80s, we performed at the Emmanuel Church on Newbury Street. If you've ever been in that beautiful oak-paneled library room, we performed there. And a couple of years, we did Midsummer Night's Dream, we did Twelfth Night, we did As You Like It, and I played the melancholy Jacques. And my ex-wife, the mother of my only son, was Rosalind, and we're still very, very good friends. And As You Like It, the melancholy Jacques, nobody gets the better of him, usually, except there's one scene in the forest where he's verbally jousting with Touchstone, and more about that later. But Orlando is with Adam, an old servant Adam, and they haven't had anything to eat for quite some time. And they pull their swords as the Duke, who's been usurped by his brothers out in the forest, they're having a feast, and Orlando pulls his sword and he's ready to fight for food if he has to. And the Duke says, no, just sit down, sup, eat with us. And then the Duke makes this reference about this woeful pageant. And picking up on the theme of the woeful pageant, Jacques delivers probably the most famous lines in the entire Shakespearean canon. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. One manner's time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And then the whining schoolboy with satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. And then the soldier, full of strange oaths, bearded like the pard, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. Then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon line, with eyes severe and beard a formal cut, full of wise saws and instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age slips into the lean and slipped pantaloon, with spectacles on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big, manly voice, turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. The last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans taste, sans eyes, sans everything. So I want to guess it's 30 years ago. I think it is. We were rehearsing this. We were about a week from opening. And the director, a good friend of mine named Charles Boyle, and Charles Boyle is one of those Oxfordians that believes the 17th Earl of Oxford wrote the plays, but that's all right. Brilliant guy, brilliant director, and he tragically had a stroke when he was 49 years old that has really, really impaired him a lot. But we were in rehearsal and he said, Stephen, characters in this play, they all refer to you as the melancholy Jacques. And he said, I want you to know I think you've got the melancholy part down just fine. But he said there's other aspects to this character. Go find them. And please, 2 nights from now in rehearsal, will you show me something besides melancholy? So I went back, and there's a scene in the play, if you know it, where he's with Touchstone. And Touchstone is the court jester, and Touchstone really gets the better of him. And that doesn't happen to Jacques very often. And so Touchstone leaves. And then Jacques is by himself, and I think he wants to laugh, but he's such a curmudgeon that he can't quite laugh. But then eventually, he can't help himself, and he starts laughing. And he doesn't realize that Duke Sr. and his men are nearby. Thereby, he has to explain to him what happened. So here we go. A fool! A fool! I met a fool in the forest. Motley fool. Miserable world. As I do live by food, I met a fool who laid him down and basked him in the sun and railed on Lady Fortune in good terms, in good set terms, and yet a motley fool. Good morrow, fool, quoth I. No, sir, quoth he, call me not fool, till heaven hath sent me fortune. Then he drew a dial from his poke. Looking at it with lackluster eyes, says very wisely, it is 10 o'clock. 'Tis but an hour ago since it was 9. And after 1 hour more, it will be 11. And so from hour to hour, we write, and then from hour to hour we rot, and thereby hangs a tale. When I did hear the noble fool thus moral on time, my lungs began to crow like Chanticleer, that fools should be so deep contemplative, and I did laugh sans intermission an hour by his dial. Oh, noble fool! Oh, worthy fool! Oh, that I were a fool. I am ambitious for a motley coat. Invest me in my motley, give me leave to speak my mind, and I will through and through cleanse the foul body of the infected world if they will patiently receive my medicine. So the best production I saw of Hamlet, and I've seen lots of them. 3 years ago, the Littleton Lyceum, they hired the junior Shakespeare company from Shakespeare and Company out in Lenox. All right, they're all 23 years old as the oldest. After 23, you can't be a member of this company, I'm pretty sure. They did it in 90 minutes with no intermission. Everybody played multiple characters except the woman that played Hamlet. And I want to tell you, folks, she was better than Kenneth Branagh. She was better than Olivier. This actress was just incredible. She wore her pigtail down in her shirt. She had a cap on. And I did not for a minute think it was a woman. I mean, I was totally convinced it was Hamlet. And the fellow that played Polonius, one of the characters, was just incredible. And I liked it because he played him with a sense of gravitas. I've seen productions of Hamlet where Polonius is played as a bumbling, stumbling fool. And I think that's the wrong acting choice to make. All right, so I know you're going to know this speech. A lot of you will certainly recognize this speech. It's early in the play. Laertes is home on spring break from college. All right, but spring break is over, and now Laertes is going back. All right? Polonius sees that he hasn't boarded the ship yet, and he's dilly-dallying and procrastinating. So Polonius takes this time to chide him. And he figures as long as he has his attention, that he'll try to give him the advice, just the kind of fatherly advice that most 22-year-olds don't want. Yet here, Laertes, aboard. Aboard for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sails, and you are stayed for there. My blessing with thee. And these few precepts in thy memory look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast in their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul like hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged comrade. Beware of a quarrel, but once in it, bear it, that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy. Rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. And they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that. Neither a borrower nor lender be. For loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing, season this in thee. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm going to end with Puck's closing remarks from Midsummer Night's Dream. When I was in high school, I played Demetrius my junior year, and then my senior year, the head of the theater department, the head of the music department, and the head of the art department, they all got together, and the head of the English department, and they all got together, and we did a musical adaptation of Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you know what we called it? Or what they called it? Into the Woods. Now I'm telling you, we performed this at the Off-Broadway Musical Comedy Theater in Ogunquit, Maine, the summer of 1972, when I was 20 years old. All right? I'm convinced, no one's going to convince me otherwise, I'm convinced Stephen Sondheim was up in Ogunquit, saw the title Into the Woods, it probably wasn't copyrighted, and took that title for his play. This is being recorded. I probably shouldn't be saying this. Stephen Sondheim, I beg your pardon. But anyway, so I played Demetrius. It was a wonderful, wonderful show. Oh my God, we had so much fun. When I was a senior, it was also teachers. So it was high school students and some of the teachers. Some of the teachers took the parts. There was a fellow that taught English. His name was Arthur Lipkin, and he played Bottom, and he was just extraordinary. So in 1995, I played Oberon in the Concord Players production, and I was Oberon. But I've always kind of wanted to be Puck, really. But 6'4" guys don't get cast as Puck. They just don't. I mean, usually it's a dancer, a lot of cross-gender casting, a lot of dancers and gymnasts that can, you know, skip and jump and whatever. But I always wanted to play Puck, and so I tell people, when you do your own shows, You can be whoever the hell you want to be. So, at the end of Act 4, we go into Act 5. Pretty short act if you know the play. And Oberon and Puck are having this big conversation, and then eventually Oberon leaves, and Puck is by himself. And he looks out at the audience, and he gives his closing remarks. And I think he's asking you, as an audience member, to consider, what is it you just took part in? What did you watch? What was it? Was it dream? Was it reality? Was it a combination of both? If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended. That you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme, no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck now to scape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long, else the Puck a liar call. So, good night unto you all. Give me your hands, if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends. Thank you ever so much. Ever so much. Thank you.